Okay, so yesterday we started talking about this, but just Sohcahtoa, I guess I could write it up here, is probably one of the main things that you remember from geometry. And it's how to find sine, cosine, tangent, and then we're going to talk about the other three, excuse me. The reciprocal identities, how to find what those values are, but you can only use it on right triangles. So, talked about how like this so means the sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Well, if you're looking at a triangle, across from the right angle is always the hypotenuse. If this is my angle, adjacent is one right next to it, and opposite is the one across from it. So you would have done these three in geometry. Then you also have the reciprocal ones. Cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So hypotenuse over adjacent. Same thing for cotangent, reciprocal of tangent, adjacent over opposite. Now if you're given two sides, you need to find the third one. Since it is a right triangle, we can use the Pythagorean Theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's just important to remember that c is your hypotenuse. Doesn't matter which one of these you use for which, opposite or adjacent, but c has to be your hypotenuse. Okay, so the first thing we're doing is we're given a triangle, and we want to find the exact value of the 6 trig functions of the angle. Well, if this is my angle, and I know 12 and 9, well 12 is the one right next to the angle, so I know that my adjacent is 12. And I know 9 is opposite, so I know my opposite is 9. But what I'm missing is my hypotenuse. So to find my hypotenuse, we're going to have to use Pythagorean Theorem. So 12 squared plus 9 squared equals c squared. So 144 plus 81, which is 225. So that means 15 is my hypotenuse. Okay, now I know when you take the square root, you can get a positive or negative number, but when you're talking about distance, you're talking about triangles, your answer is always going to be positive. Alright, so now we have what we need, so now we can find our 6 trig functions. So sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, so 9 over 15. Okay, now this will reduce, because 9 and 15, 3 go into both of those, so this would be 3/5. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that would be 12 over 15. Those are both divisible by 3, so that reduces to 4/5. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that would be 9 over 12. Those are both divisible by 3, so that would be 3/4. Okay, so those are your first three, but you have to find all 6, so now you're doing your reciprocals. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So if sine is 3/5, that means cosecant is 5/3. If cosine is 4/5, that means secant is its reciprocal. So that means secant is 5/4. And then cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, so it is 4/3. Okay. Okay, example number 2. I have 2 things I know. So I know that the adjacent is 2, because this is my angle, it's right next to it. And I also know my opposite is 2. So to find my hypotenuse, I'm going to have to use the Pythagorean Theorem. So I know that 2 squared plus 2 squared is c squared. Excuse me. So 4 plus 4 is c squared. So that means 8 equals c squared. So that means c is the square root of 8. Okay, now square root of 8 is not perfect, but if it can break down, you have to break it down. So 8 breaks into 2 and 4 breaks into 2 and 2. So that means this is 2 square root of 2. Okay, so now we can find our 6 trig functions. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite is 2. Hypotenuse is 2 square root of 2. Well, the 2's cancel. So my sine is 1 over square root of 2. Okay, but I can't leave that as my answer because you can't have a square root in the denominator. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to rationalize it. So you're going to have to multiply by square root of 2 over square root of 2. So my sine is square root of 2 over 2. Okay, cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's 2 over 2 square root of 2. Okay, now if you'll notice, that was the exact same thing we got for sine. So when I reduced, I got 1 over square root of 2, and then I had to rationalize it, and I got square root of 2 over 2. Now, if you see that they're going to be the same thing, you don't have to go through all the work. Just know that they're the same thing and give me the answer. Okay, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's 2 over 2, which reduces to 1. Okay, cosecant, that's the reciprocal of sine. So before I rationalized, my answer to sine was 1 over square root of 2. The reciprocal of 1 over square root of 2 is square root of 2 over 1, which is the square root of 2. Okay, same thing with cosine. Before I rationalized it was 1 over square root of 2, so the reciprocal was square root of 2 over 1, which is the square root of 2. And then cotangent is reciprocal of tangent. Reciprocal of 1 is 1. That's really crooked. Okay, so for this last section, you're going to be given some trig function, sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent, okay? And you're going to be given a value. Now, we don't know what the angle is. Doesn't really matter what the angle is. We just know that the value of sine is 3/4. Now, based on what we know from Sohcahtoa, from our right triangle trigonometry, we can be able to find what this is to be able to find the third side and find the other 5 trig functions. Okay, so if I'm given sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So the only thing I'm missing that I need is my adjacent, because I know my opposite is 3 and my hypotenuse is 4. Okay, so to find the adjacent, we're going to use the Pythagorean Theorem. So I would have 3 squared plus b squared equals 4 squared, because this time you're given the hypotenuse. So we're solving for one of the sides. So this would be 9 plus b squared equals 16. B squared equals 7. So that means b is the square root of 7. Okay, 7 is not perfect, but 7 also doesn't reduce any further, so that is going to be our adjacent side. Okay, so what we have to do now is we have to find the rest of the 5. So, because we already have this one, the 6th one. So I already have sine, so the next one I'd find would be cosine. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So square root of 7 over 4. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I'd have 3 over square root of 7. Okay, but I can't leave the square root of 7 in the bottom, so we're going to have to rationalize the denominator. So this would be 3 square root of 7 over 7. Okay, then we're going to do the reciprocals. So the reciprocal sine is cosecant. So cosecant would be 4 over 3. The reciprocal of cosine is secant. So that'd be 4 over the square root of 7. Okay, can't leave square root of 7 on bottom, so we're going to rationalize it. So this would be 4 square root of 7 over 7. And then cotangent is reciprocal of tangent. So before I rationalized tangent, I had 3 over the square root of 7. So if I flip that, I have the square root of 7 over 3. Okay, for the last example, I just chose one that had a whole number, so I make sure we know what to do if they have a whole number. So tangent is 3. Well, tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. So if you have a whole number, this would be like the same thing as being over 1. So that means that my opposite is 3, and my adjacent is 1. So anytime you have a whole number, just put it over 1. 1's going to go on the bottom, and that's whatever it goes to. So like tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's why your opposite is 3, your adjacent is 1. So to find my hypotenuse, I'm going to do the Pythagorean Theorem. So 3 squared plus 1 squared equals c squared. So 9 plus 1 equals c squared. So 10 equals c squared. So that means c is the square root of 10. Okay, 10 doesn't break down, and 10 is not perfect, so we're going to leave it. Square root of 10. So now we can find our trig functions. So sine, is opposite over hypotenuse. So 3 over square root of 10. So then I have to rationalize. So I have to multiply by square root of 10 over square root of 10. So 3 square root of 10 over 10. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So 1 over square root of 10. And I'll rationalize. So this would be square root of 10 over 10. Okay, I already have my tangent, so now I'm going to do reciprocals. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So before I rationalize sine, I had 3 over square root of 10. So if I flip that, I have square root of 10 over 3. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So if I have 1 over square root of 10, if I flip that, I have square root of 10 over 1, which is square root of 10. And then cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So tangent was 3, reciprocal of 3 is 1/3. Okay, your homework over this is page 308, 1 through 26 all. Okay, and then that would be, since today's Tuesday, that would be due on Thursday. And we'll do questions tomorrow in class if you guys have any.